Hello, I'm Tony Phillips from Cloud Design Box. In this video I'm going to go through creating an application customizer in the new SharePoint framework. So I'm just going to go through a very basic tutorial on how to get some HTML and CSS onto every modern page inside SharePoint Online. So on the screen now I've got a new modern site, and as you can see you are restricted on these sites at the moment. You can't add script editor web parts to add your customizations or content editor web parts. You can't add custom actions, so you can't apply design to the whole site, and you can't add a JS link as well, so you can't change the look and feel of lists and libraries. So that's all changing. The new SharePoint framework has a preview of extensions, which is available now. In fact, it's just had the release candidate made available last week. So hopefully this is a good thing to start practicing. Obviously, it's not the release version yet, so don't use these on production environments. But what you should do is get a Office 365 developer tenancy set up. So if you go to the Dev Center and you type in SharePoint Framework, you've got all the guides here on how to set up an Office 365 developer tenancy, and how to create your app catalog to distribute your apps once you've got them bundled up. And there's also some guidance here on how to set up your machine so you've got the right development environment. So there's a few simple things you need to get installed before you start this up. So there's Node.js, and you want to install the long-term support version of this. So this is your package installer, and that's going to download and install any packages that are needed for the SharePoint framework. And after you've installed this, we then need to go down here and install Yeoman and Gulp. And the reason for those two products is Yeoman is the scaffolding app, and what this does is Microsoft release a Yeoman template, which brings in all the different third-party open source packages that are required to generate your SharePoint solution. And once you've got that generator installed and you run it, Node.js will then download all those packages that the Yeoman template has got in it. So that's pretty important to install those products. You also want to install Gulp. So this is a task runner, a task running application, and what this is going to do is all those tasks, once you've got your project set up and you want to bundle it, you want to run it on a test server, you want to create your your final release installation package, the Gulp task runner is going to go through all those tasks that it needs to do to minimize your CSS and convert TypeScript to JavaScript, and also to actually bundle all these packages together. And it also acts as a local server, so you can actually test these projects that we're creating inside our development environment without the need for a server, or without a need for actually deploying this code to the server, so we can just use our own machine. So it's very, very simple to install these products once you've got Node.js installed. We literally just run that command and that installs it globally on your machine. That's why I've got the -G there. And install Yeoman and Gulp. So very, very simple to install those two products. And then for the actual Yeoman template for Microsoft, we just run this command here, and this will install the generator that we need to actually create those new projects. So once you've got those installed, we can go through the steps to actually create our new project. So I'm going to open up the Node.js command prompt. So I'm just going to open this up on my machine. So what we're probably going to want to do is create a new folder to create our new project. So I'm going to open up a folder I've already got created and just create a new subfolder in there. And then I'm actually going to go inside that folder in the command prompt. And this is where I'm going to create my new project. So to create a new SharePoint project using that SharePoint generator, I just type in yo space @Microsoft/SharePoint, press return, and this is going to give me the variables to create my new project. So that should happen right at the beginning. The whole process will take 10 or 15 minutes to generate this project. So I'm not going to go through the whole process on here. We'll just go through, set it up, then I'll skip to one that we've generated earlier. So this has now prompted me to answer a few questions. So what do you want to call the name of the project? I've just kept it, the name of the solution, I've just kept it the same. Do you want to use a current folder or create a subfolder? I'm just going to press return and use a current folder. Do you want to deploy the solution to all sites immediately without having to run the feature deployment? We don't need to worry about that at the moment. We can change it later. I'm just going to set that to no at the moment. And then do you want to create a web part or extension? So we're creating an application customizer, so we can apply some CSS and JavaScript to every page on the modern site, which is very similar to the custom actions that we had previously. And that's an extension which is currently in preview. So go down to extensions, select that, and then we get the choice of 3 different extension types. So we've got the list view command set, where we can add some actions onto those list views. We've got the field customizer, which is effectively replacing JSLink, and then we've got the application customizer, where we're going to apply some JavaScript to every page on the site. So that's what we're going to use. And then we can give it a name. I'll call this custom design. Give it a description, just press return. So this will scroll through now and it'll create that project. Green is great. If you get some warnings, you can usually ignore them. If there's any red error messages, then something's gone wrong. So I'm going to just cancel that because it's going to take a while. And I'm going to open up one that I created earlier. So I've created this project earlier, and to open it up in Visual Studio Code, just type in code space full stop. And that will open up Visual Studio Code, and it will actually open up in that particular folder. So I've got all the correct files available to me. So that'll just take a second to open up in Visual Studio Code. So you can see I've got the File Explorer on the left hand side, and the only files we're going to be using inside here are the src folder, and then extensions, because we've created an extension, and then the actual extension name that we've created, which is in this case it's SUG-UK Demo 1. So we've got 2 files inside this folder. We've got a TypeScript file that's going to contain the code for our project, and then we've also got a manifest file in here as well. So the manifest file is important. When you create this new project, it creates a Hello World project that you can see. Actually, if I scroll down here, it's got some very simple TypeScript in here, which is effectively the same as JavaScript, this bit of code here. And if you're familiar with JavaScript, then you should be able to see quite easily what this is doing. So it's saying if there's no message, set the variable message to say no properties were provided. Otherwise, it's going to alert hello from, and it's going to bring in our title, and it's also going to show the message that we've fed through. Now that message is going to be coming from a property that we're going to feed through via a URL. So if you look at the dev site, it actually gives you the URL to test these custom applications with. And I've got a copy here in the comments, which I'll make available on GitHub, this project. So effectively we've got the URL of our SharePoint site, and then we've got some variables attached to it. So we've got load the SharePoint framework equals true, and then we're also pointing our debug manifest file at our local host, because we're going to be serving this code from our local machine. So that's actually looking at our own machine when it runs. And then we've also got the custom actions ID. So this ID, you're going to have to replace this GUID here with the one in your manifest file. So this is actually the ID that we're going to use. So you would copy and paste this and include it in that URL, which I've already done in this example. And then right at the end of this, we've got some properties that we're sending across. So we've got this test message, hello as property. And if I copy this and paste it into the browser, once our server's running, we should get a response on here. So to run our server, we type in gulp serve, and this will take a few moments to fire up, and this will serve our application from our local machine, so we can test it on a live SharePoint site, but the SharePoint site, our browser will be looking on our local machine for some of that code. So we can see this is starting to run now. It depends how fast your machine is. My tablet that I'm using isn't particularly powerful, so it does take a few moments for this to come up. So we should see, because we've typed in gulp serve without the no browser command, this will open up a web browser when it's finished loading with the local workbench on. But we're not going to be using that today, we're just going to be using a live SharePoint site. So we can just ignore that when it pops up. So now that's running. If I go to my web browser, again it's opened up this local workbench, we don't need that, we're just going to use our test site here. So I'm going to paste in that URL that we copied earlier. So let me grab that. So this will ask us if we want to allow debug scripts, and that's because potentially, these could be coming from a malicious location. Obviously we know we're testing this, so load debug scripts. And we can see we're prompted straight away with that alert box. So we know that this application customizer is working. This alert box now is running hello from, and then it's getting the title, and then it's passing across our message, hello as a property. Now if we change that message, so if we go in that URL where we've got this message coming across here, I type in hello SharePoint user group UK and press enter, then we get that message appearing in our alert box. So that's what you get when you create a new project out of the box. You get this app setting up for you automatically. Now what we're going to do is we're going to insert some HTML into the top placeholder here, which you can't see at the moment, it's not visible, and there's also a bottom placeholder on here as well. We're just going to add something to the top placeholder. I'm going to do it in a simple way as possible. So you can follow the tutorial on here if you want to go through the probably the best practice way of doing it, where you handle all the possibilities. I'm just going to do a very light version of that, just so we can get through it in a shorter video. So I'm going to get rid of this code here. We're not going to use that in our app. So I'm not going to use that code we had previously. We're not going to have that alert box pop up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some additional imports. So at the top of the page here, under the SP application base, I'm going to bring in a couple of extra imports here. I'm going to bring in the placeholder content and also the placeholder name. So we need these two imports to be able to call those placeholders and access them on the page. So that's quite straightforward, just adding those two libraries into there. And then what we're going to do initially is inside our default class here, but before we run the main function, we're going to declare a variable. So we're going to declare an object for our placeholder. So I'm just going to call this header placeholder. It's going to be of type placeholder content. So we've declared that here, and we're going to use that later on in the code. So to begin with, we're probably going to have to find out which placeholders are available on the page that we're running. So what we'll do is we'll just see what placeholders are available before we start trying to insert anything into them. So what we're going to do now is just get a list of all the placeholders that are available, and to do that I'm just going to write to the console log of the browser. So console.log, I'm going to say available placeholders, and then we're going to put the available placeholders that are on the page. So we do that by accessing the context, placeholder provider, and then we should have placeholder names available. So I'm just going to write these in a format that we can see the names just comma separated. Just to make it a bit easier for us to pick out which placeholders we want to use in this project. Okay, so we can see if there's any mistakes I've made in here, we'll see those highlighted. I can see that actually I've made a mistake with something here. So I missed out a close bracket, and then that's it, it's fixed it and it's no longer highlighted red. Okay, so this hopefully should write to the console log the available placeholders. So when I save this, you'll see that actually my gulp task then recompiles it. So if I go back to the browser and refresh this page, we should see if we press F12 in Chrome and we get up those browser tools, we should be able to see the console. And if we scroll up here, there we go, we've got a comment in here, and we can see the available placeholders are top and bottom. So those are the ones that should be available, but in the future Microsoft might make other ones available. Some might not be available on some pages, so it's quite good to just use that technique to make sure that you've got a list of those that are available on the page, and it'll probably help when you're trying to debug problems with it as well. So the next thing we need to do is actually add our HTML into that placeholder that's available. So to do that, we're going to see if the placeholder's actually available on the page, if it actually already exists. So we're going to do if it doesn't exist. So this is if our container isn't defined already. So if it isn't, we're going to set it. So we're going to set that object we created earlier, that placeholder object, and we're going to again use this .context, placeholder provider, and then we're going to try and create the contents. So we're going to use placeholder name.top. Actually, it shows me there which ones are available as well. And then if I want, I can put a dispose method in here to handle that. Okay, and once that is that's been created, we can then set the actual HTML of it. So once we've got that container object, we can then use the DOM element and access the inner HTML of that. So again, this is very similar to what we used to do in the custom actions where you set the inner HTML of elements on pages, but in this case we're having to actually put that into this placeholder we've got available to us rather than just anywhere on the page. Okay, so we can put in our HTML. Oops. So let's just get rid of that. Okay, and then if we save it, so this should now again compile in our gulp serve. Then we should be able to refresh that. We can see that we've got the word test here, and this is in our, if we just press F12, we can have a look at the zone that that's in. So we have a look at that div, and we can see actually this is in our placeholder top. So that's the one that we've selected and we've injected our HTML into. So that's how we get HTML into the page, and obviously you can make that a bit more complicated if you wanted to. So for example, we could add in a class here. And save that. So we want to add some styles to this. So we've got this header area here. I want it to display maybe as a coloured block. So we need to add some styles to the page. So what we're going to do is we're going to import some styles, and we're going to create a new module for some Sass. So some Sass is a superset of CSS. So the CSS that you're normally used to adding to a page, we can add exactly the same CSS to these pages as well. So first we need to import it. So this file doesn't exist at the moment, but I'm going to make it in a minute. So I'm going to import it, and I'm going to use the word styles. So this is just going to be like a relative link to it. It's going to be inside this folder. So I'm going to call it mystyles.module.scss. Save it. And that file doesn't exist at the moment. So I'm going to right click here, sorry, in this folder here, new file, mystyles.module.scss. And this is where I'm going to put my CSS. Okay, so I could display it as a block or an inline block, something like that. I can also, apply a background colour. Let's make it green, nice and simple. Save that. And this is now going to bring in those styles into this page. Now, if I was to refresh this, sorry, I've made a typo there, just realised. Modules, it should be module. That should now resolve it. And you'll see that those styles haven't been applied. We haven't got a green background here. And if we press F12, you'll see that if we select my header, no styles have been applied to this area. And that's because we imported this as a module, what TypeScript is doing is applying this variable, and it's actually taking those CSS styles and adding in a hash value at the end of them to make them unique on the page. And what we've done here is we've hard coded our my header class, and it's not matching up with those styles that we've defined at the top here. So what we do to get around that is we get rid of that, and we just escape out of the HTML, go to styles dot, and then you can see my header appears here. So what this is going to do is it's going to replace my header here with the one that it's generated that custom variable for, so it doesn't clash with anything on the page. So when this refreshes, so if we go back to our page now, and refresh it, we should see that the header now has a custom style. And if I select the header, I can see this is where I was going to run previously. My class, my style was applying it to my header underscore 72, etc. And my class wasn't matching that, it just had my header. So by doing that, we avoid any clashes with any other styles on the page. So it's really useful, really important that you do use modules where you can, so we don't accidentally apply our styles to something else on the page, and then you can use whatever naming format you want because you're less likely to have clashes on the page itself. So if we wanted to add in some more HTML, we can do. So we can write it in here if we want, or we could dynamically generate it. You know, we can use jQuery and other things as well on here if we really needed to, if we go into a bit more depth. But just to add in some simple HTML, I'm just going to add in an image tag. So your images, you might store in a CDN, but it could just be, you know, a SharePoint style library or site assets library, and that's what I'm just going to use here for easiest. So I'm going to use an image that I've already uploaded, and this is just a logo. So it's in the site assets library. Just dragged and dropped it into that SharePoint library. It's just a transparent PNG. And save that. And that should be reflected on our page. So if we open up that page again and refresh it, we can see we've got that image now on the page. So again, you know, this is a very, very simple way of adding some HTML to the page. Obviously this could be used for branding, but it could also be used for things like notifications. You know, we could get really complex with this if we wanted to. We could have in some REST API calls. I've got another example on GitHub which you can download, which is it reads from an announcement list and it scrolls the announcements across the top, sort of like a bit of a news feed. You know, you can be quite creative with these. It doesn't have to just be plain branding. SharePoint has a lot of great branding features already built in. You know, you can replace a logo and the color scheme. But if you did need to do, you know, a bit further customization, you know, you could use one of these application customizers to apply this HTML to the whole site. So what I'll do is I'll just tidy this up a bit. I'll put in some additional CSS. Save that, and then we've got a fairly nice starting point then when we load the page. So we'll refresh the browser again, and so I've added some padding, added in a border, changed the background color, and that gives you hopefully a good idea of, you know, the sort of things you could do just by adding some simple HTML to the page. So we've only edited this top header area. We haven't edited the rest of the page. Now, what you could do is you could apply CSS to outside of that top and bottom zone, but it's not advised because Microsoft might apply some updates, it might change some of these class names, and your customizations will break. If you use the top and bottom zone, Microsoft are sort of guaranteeing that they're not going to mess around with those zones. Those are placeholders for you to populate with your solutions. So technically you could apply some CSS to this bit here. If I wanted to apply some CSS maybe to, I don't know, this title link here. Now if I put this into my module, that's going to add a variable to it and it isn't going to apply to the page. So what I could do is I could create another SAS file. And I haven't created this one as a dot module. I'm just going to create it as a as just a standard SAS file. So inside here, I could add in a background color. Save that. And at the top here, instead of importing it as a module with those variables applied to it, I could just require it, and this will just bring it in its pure form. Again, this isn't advised, but it's just an example to show you how the modules work and how it would work if you did touch the CSS outside of those containers. So if I refresh this, so we can see we have applied some custom CSS outside of the top and bottom zone, but like I say, this isn't recommended. Now if you went to a communication site, you'll see actually this is laid out differently. So if you did start editing that CSS, it's not going to work very well across team sites and communication sites. So it's worth keeping that in mind and trying just to stick to the top and bottom areas. Now on a communication site, this looks pretty good already. And if I was to add in the header on this page, it would actually be quite probably a bit too big for the header, and it'll probably look like the header's been replicated. So if I actually try and run our customization on the communication site, see that actually it's made this header much bigger. The area for actually navigating the page is much smaller. It feels like this has been replicated twice. So you'll probably want to use more subtle ways of changing the look and feel of the communication sites. So as an example, if we load up another example, which is available on GitHub. So while waiting for that to start up, I will show you what we've got in this solution. So this is a bit more complicated. So what I'm doing is I'm actually making some REST calls. So I'm bringing in the HTTP clients. I'm also bringing in jQuery and jQuery cycle, and they're coming from a CDN, because I'm going to use some of that in the application customizer in that top zone. So if I scroll down a bit on here, you can see we've got a slideshow, and this slideshow has been generated from an announcement list. So I've got my REST call here, and that's actually looking at a announcement list on the site. So this is actually relative to the site. And then further down here, so we're doing quite a few things in this example. So we're putting some Google Analytics code on the page. What I'm doing is I'm just showing an alert on the page to show that it has been loaded successfully. And in addition to that, we've also got an area here where I'm showing the time and date, and we're putting that all together in our top header zone, and hopefully it'll look pretty good. So to test this one, I've got a different URL that I'm running, and that's because we've got a different GUID in here because it's a different project. So that GUID needs to be updated from the manifest file. So let's try that in the browser. So first we prompt to a Google Analytics loaded, so that just shows us that the Google Analytics code is loaded on the page in the header. And then we've got the date, which is appearing incorrectly. It looks like there's a mistake in there. I have to go and fix that. And then we've got the announcements, and these are being fed live using the REST API from an announcement list on this site. So we've got dates announced for Hackathon, new demo on GitHub. And if I go to site contents, So we've got an announcement list on this site, and we've got those two announcements here. And if I wanted to add a new announcement, let's call it hello. And then go back to the original URL. New GitHub demo, dates announced, then hello. So that's come straight from our announcement list. So hopefully that showed you, you can be as creative as you like with these. You can add widgets to the page, you could do all sorts. It's not just for, branding or changing look and feel, this is for adding functionality. And just by using JavaScript, you don't have to go into too much detail with TypeScript unless you're making more complex applications. But this date and time bit, which is broke at the moment, but it's just using JavaScript. So we can look at this, and we can add JavaScript to the page, and it'll just be exactly the same really as creating our custom actions in the classic pages. So there's a lot of opportunity here to make changes and to enhance SharePoint and enhance the user's experience. So I hope you found this useful. So you can get the GitHub demos from our repository on there, and there's some useful links in there. So my blog is where I'm going to post this video. There's also Waldeck's blog is fantastic, anything to do with the SharePoint framework. He's always there first with some great examples and lots of free advice on his blog site, which is fantastic. And the best sites is the SharePoint framework developer site. It's got some great tutorials, great ways to get you set up, and the tutorials go through it a bit more detail than our examples today. So I hope you found that useful.